Good morning, class. First, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, and you can also see the first slide, which reads To Kill a Mockingbird, Chapter 24 Summary and Main Ideas. Before you begin to navigate through slides, remember that you'll be taking notes and answering questions on the page that you created for today called TKAM, Chapter 24 Summary and Discussion Questions. To navigate through the presentation, simply scroll up and down to view the next slide. You can always pause, resume, or rewind in case you miss something. I will tell you which slides to copy in your notes and which slides you do not need to copy. Please write that information down, and if you need to go back and listen to my explanation, please do so. You're going to go at your own pace, so do not rush through this presentation. When you finish your questions, you can begin reading Chapter 25. And at this point, you could go ahead and start your presentation. So this first slide is a slide that you do want to copy. Chapter 24 opens up with Aunt Alexandra and the missionary circle meeting at the Finch household for tea. And to try and get Scout to become more like a lady, she's forced to wear a dress instead of her overalls, which we're accustomed to her wearing. And what she's going to do is she's going to help Calpurnia serve desserts and refreshments to the women in the missionary circle. And during this chapter, the ladies in the missionary circle are going to discuss the extremely poor and dirty life of the Maroons. And in this discussion, we are going to see the hypocrisy of the women in the missionary circle and, also in Macomb, Alabama. This slide is another slide that you're going to want to copy. So in the previous slide, I mentioned the missionary circle. I also mentioned the Maroons. So what are these two? Well, the missionary circle, they're just ladies from the church, ladies in Macomb. And what missionary circles do is they gather to aid in helping others. The Maroons, they're a poor and ignorant African tribe that is being converted to Christianity. So the ladies of the missionary circle, especially Mrs. Merriweather, show sympathy for the Maroons. This is a slide that you do not have to copy. However, you are going to be answering a question in your notes for today. So you've heard me mention hypocrisy in the previous slides. So what is hypocrisy? Well, it's the practice of claiming to have moral standards or beliefs to which one's own behavior does not conform, or some type of pretense. So what does all that mean? Well, here's an example. So your teacher tells his or her students to accept others for who they are and for their beliefs, but the teacher is closed-minded and won't accept others' differences. So they're being a hypocrite, essentially. All right, so here's a question I'd like for you to answer in your composition book right now. So how do the women in the missionary circle show their hypocrisy or show that they are hypocrites? And here's a hint to help with your answer. Think about how the people in their community are treated, and they have sympathy for the Maroons, all right, people of the same color. So use those two thoughts to help come up with your answer for this question. Again, how do the women in the missionary circle show their hypocrisy or show that they are hypocrites? This slide is a slide that you're going to want to copy. So Mrs. Merriweather is a very interesting character in this chapter, and what she's going to do is she's going to reveal the hypocrisy of the missionary circle by stressing her dislike of how the black people in Macomb are upset about Tom Robinson's conviction or being found guilty. All right, at one point in the chapter, she says there's nothing more distracting than a sulky darky. All right, so referring to black people as darky is a derogatory term. But a few pages before that, she does mention that Mrs. Merriweather's large brown eyes always filled with tears when she considered the oppressed. Okay, the oppressed being the Maroons. But what she fails to realize is that the black people in her own town are also being oppressed. All right, so this is where being a hypocrite comes into play. You could ask yourself, well, how could one person feel sorry for a group of, an African tribe and not feel upset about the people, the black people in their own community? And that's where you get being a hypocrite. And my belief is that she feels upset about the Maroons because she doesn't have to live next to them. All right, but the black people in her own community, she has to live amongst them. And I think this is where her dislike or distaste for the black people in her community comes from, but definitely revealing that she's a hypocrite. You can't feel sorry for one group because they're in Africa and not feel sorry for the same group because you live amongst them. This is a slide that you're going to want to copy down in your notes. All right, so Tom Robinson. What's been going on with Tom Robinson? Well, we know that he was convicted, so he was found guilty of raping Mayella Ewell. He's now put into prison. And so in this chapter, Atticus informs Aunt Alexandra, Miss Maudie, and Calpurnia that Tom has been killed. And I'm going to actually read from the book right now. Cal, Atticus said, I want you to go with me out to Helen Robinson's house. What's the matter? Aunt Alexandra asked, alarmed by the look on my father's face. Tom's dead. Aunt Alexandra put her hands to her mouth. They shot him. He was running. It was during their exercise period. They said he just broke into a blind, raving charge of the fence and started climbing over, right in front of them. Did they try to stop him? Didn't they give him any warning? Aunt Alexandra's voice shook. Oh, yes, the guards called him to stop. They fired a few shots in the air, then to kill. They got him just as he went over the fence. They said if he had 2 good arms, he'd have made it. He was moving that fast. 17 bullet holes in him. They didn't have to shoot him that much. Cal, I want you to come out with me and help me tell Helen. And remember, Helen is Tom's wife. All right, so this is probably the most important part to you guys, even the most upsetting part of this chapter. And what's going to happen in the upcoming chapters is that Mr. Underwood is going to write an article in the newspaper, and he's going to reveal one of our biggest themes of this novel of, being a sin to kill a mockingbird, and he's going to relate Tom's death to basically the killing of a mockingbird. So you don't have to copy this slide, however you are going to be answering these questions in your composition book. So here's some discussion questions and some things to think about. So the first thing I'd like for you to do is compare and contrast the ladies in the missionary circle in chapter 24 to the black people and their church in chapter 12. How are they similar? How are they different? All right, you could also go back to chapter 12, flip through there and see how they react. And here's some things to think about when you are answering this question. Think about how fortunate the women in the missionary circle are, the things that they have, and how the people in their black church, the things that they don't have, the things that they're deprived of. And think back to how they respond or how they act despite what each group has and what the other group does not have. Okay, so that's the first thing that you're going to answer. And the second question you'll answer is, does the story about Tom Robinson seem believable? Why or why not? And explain your answer. Some things to think about with him. He's trying to escape. He's climbing a fence. We know about his disability with his left arm. So there's a number of things. Think of also about Tom Robinson's character. Remember what Mr. Link Dees shouted out in court. So does this seem like something that Tom Robinson would not only physically be capable of doing, but does this seem like something that he would do based on his disposition, based on his character? Also remember, when you are finished with these questions, you are to go to chapter 25 and start reading. If you get past 25, that's fine, because anything we do not finish this week, you are going to have to finish over spring break. Good luck.